Professor Oak has grabbed the 3 Kanto starters for himself and has travelled to Paldea to see if he still has what it takes to become a champion. There is a slight problem though, as Oak's Pokemon insurance only covers basic healing, so if any of his Pokemon faint, they won't be revived until he makes it back home to Kanto. And all of his old Kanto Pokemon are allergic to these new age potions, so Oak won't be able to use any items in battle. Could he still become champion rank and take down the evil professor of this region? Well, let's find out. Joining Oak on his journey is Green the Bulbasaur, Blue the Squirtle, and of course Red the Charmander. Now, these guys could have been some Kanto kids' best friends, but hey, Oak has a bae back home to impress. Kids just wouldn't understand. With Oak starters all together, he's ready to set off on his adventure, but it wouldn't be an adventure without a rival to push you to become stronger, and for Oak, this rival is Nemona. But rivals don't have the same spunk as they used to, so Red destroys Sprigarecto, and Green can 1v1 her Pawmi. Hopefully, she becomes a bigger threat in the future. Speaking of downgrades, Oak runs into the quote-unquote evil team of this newest generation in Team Star. But compared to organized criminals, bullied children just aren't nearly as threatening. And after a lot of yapping, Oak can go and challenge his first gym in years. Now, unlike Kanto, Red the Charmander has a massive advantage against the first gym leader as Katie uses bug types. I mean, just watch as he obliterates her first 2 Pokemon with a single Ember. You won't see that against Brock. Though I will admit that her Teddiursa can cause some problems if it gets good RNG, as it does survive an Ember. But we get pretty lucky as it only hits 2 Fury Swipes, so another Ember can finish it off for a easy first badge. These whippersnappers just aren't up to scratch at all. And Red got enough experience to evolve into Charmeleon, which won't be of much use against the Stony Cliff Titan, so it's up to Blue to take charge, and he pops off, beating the first phase with 2 Water Pulses. For phase 2, Arb enjoys the fight, so Blue and his Shelter combine their shell power to douse the Rocky Titan with a downpour of water, defeating it and giving Blue the level up to evolve into Wartortle. And Oak is left with a new friend in Arven. If you guys are enjoying Oak's adventure so far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. We're pretty close to 30k, which would be amazing to hit by the end of the year. So thank you. Before taking on the second gym, Oak decides to evolve Green into Ivysaur, which will be a good backup for the next battle against Brassius for Oak's second gym badge. And just like the last gym battle, Red is able to one-shot Brassius' lead Petalil and Smoliv. But also, much like Katie, the biggest threat to Oak and his team is Brassius' ace Sudowoodo, who we can't one-shot, though Ember does do great damage, as the Sudowoodo retaliates with a Trail Blaze, doing a respectable chunk and increasing its speed by 1. And while the correct play is definitely to switch into Green, Oak decides to trust Red as he has a chance of outspeeding, even with Sudowoodo being at +1 speed, and he clutches it, KOing with a second Ember for the second gym badge. Green, Blue, and Red are great friends and amazing Pokemon, but the upcoming battles are going to be just a bit too tough for this Kanto trio. So Oak goes out to recruit some more friends, starting with Silver the Growlithe. And in this newest generation, stones are easily accessible, so Silver gets to evolve into Arcanine, an incredibly strong Pokemon for this mid-game. But Silver isn't the only OP option, as Oak catches Crystal the Magikarp, who evolves into a Nuzlocke's best friend, the OP Gyarados. With some massive upgrades, Oak is ready to take on one of the toughest Titans in the game, Bombardier the Sky Titan. And, well, I mean, it's meant to be tough, but when you have Crystal on your team, it becomes a lot easier because she just two-shots it with Ice Fangs. Though for phase 2, Crystal is quite low, and losing her so early would be a huge blow to Oak's chance of becoming a champion. So he switches for Silver, leaving Bombardier at -2 attack, as 2 play roughs from Silver takes it down to red HP, and Nacli finishes it off with a smackdown. So far, Oak has dominated this new generation, but a combination of overconfidence and rustiness will surely come back to bite him in the future. For now though, Oak has a date with Giacomo, and this team star is a lot more intimidating when standing on a custom killing car. That's twice the size of a tank. But worse than being ran over is hearing that dreadful new age music. Ugh. Oak wants Red to burn down the speakers, but his Pawniard stands in the way and is able to survive an Ember, though it does get burnt, which means its retaliating attack does barely any damage, so Red is free to KO it with a second Ember, and thus the main target appears. Red tries to muffle the sound with a couple of smoke screens before he's forced to switch out after getting hit by a nasty snarl. So Oak sends in Silver next, and for some reason Arcanine can relearn Play Rough once he's evolved, which equals big damage onto the Dark type Starmobile, and after 3 solid hits, the Starmobile is left with a quarter HP, but Silver is also pretty low, so Oak swaps Silver out for Crystal, who can land 2 boosted brines to defeat Giacomo, and hopefully drown out those dreadful speakers. Put on something classical next time, you punk. While on the topic of punks, before Oak can challenge the electric gym leader, Nemona jumps him and, well, he wasn't expecting this battle, so he leads with Red, which has a less than favourable matchup against her Rockruff, so he's forced to instantly switch into Blue. Now, this should be an easy 1v1, but Rockruff sets up a double team as Oak in his new age forgot the type matchup and tells Blue to use Rapid Spin, doing pathetic damage. Nemona's Rockruff then uses a second double team to confuse poor Blue, causing him to miss Water Pulse on the next turn, allowing Rockruff to land a Rock Throw. Thankfully, the second Water Pulse is able to connect, but it's able to survive with Red HP, allowing it to leave Blue with just above Red HP himself with another Rock Throw. If Blue misses Water Pulse here and Rockruff crits, Oak could see his first death. Luckily though, Blue pulls through, landing the Water Pulse and finally KOing Rockruff. Nemona then sends out her Pull Me, but Blue is looking pretty weak, so Oak tags him out for Green, who gets paralyzed by a Nuzzle on the switch. Though it doesn't matter as Green is still able to land 2 C-bombs to feint the little rat, leaving Nemona with her Florgato. But as we all know, dogs win against cats, so 2 flamethrowers from Silver takes one of its 9 lives, letting Oak finally take the next step to becoming champion. Now Crystal has been pretty OP in the last 2 big boss battles, but with her sporting a 4 times weakness to electric type attacks, it's safe to say she isn't going to be playing a huge role in the upcoming battle against Iono. And honestly, even with Silver, Oak's team looks like it's going to have a pretty tough time against this highly obnoxious gym leader. Well, all Oak can do is lock the hell in. I mean, he does know a thing or two about electrifying women. Silver quickly one-shots Wattrel with a Terra boosted flamethrower, forcing Iono to send in her Belly Bolt. But its best move against Silver is a weak water gun, so 2 more flamethrowers finish it off. Luxio is third and replaces Belly Bolt, but since Intimidate doesn't affect Silver's special attack, another flamethrower can OHKO. But her foot soldiers are never the issue as she sends in her ace Miss Magius. This Pokemon gives Oak instant PTSD as it's just as annoying as Agatha's Gengars back in Kanto. And a great example is the turn 1 Confuse Ray into Silver, who then hits himself. On turn 2, Miss Magius hits Silver with a boosted Hex. Thankfully though, he doesn't hit himself this time, but he is in range to get KO'd by a second Hex, so after landing a Flamethrower, Oak swaps him out for Green, who gets chunked by the incoming Hex. Oak did prep Green with a Person Berry, which cures Green's confusion after being hit by a Confuse Ray, so he can land a Seed Bomb for some decent chip. The berry didn't stop Iono from spamming Confuse Ray though, so it lands a second time, and this time Green can't cure it, and he ends up hitting himself. Oak isn't really sure about the damage from Hex as it is a new gen move after all, so he switches Green out just to be safe and brings in the reliable Red, who also avoids the confusion with a Person Berry, allowing him to land a crit slash for Oak's 3rd gym badge. Oak gets to finally enjoy Paldea a bit as the next couple of battles are a bit of a vacation, as next is Mela, who is a literal wash as Blue sets up a rain dance and surfs her team to victory, and the next Titan is Orthworm, which just gets cooked by Red's embers. Well, the vacation is over pretty quickly, but Oak did bring back a nice souvenir in Sun the Execute, another powerful stone evolution that Oak wastes no time evolving into Executor, which will be perfect for the upcoming battle against a fellow old man in Kofu the water type gym leader. Oak's Pineapple Tree does have a minus defense nature, and Kofu's lead Veluza has Pluck, which could be deadly, so Oak terrestrializes Sun into a pure Psychic type, but even without the flying weakness, Pluck chunks Sun for 1/3 of his HP, but Oak came prepared for Sun's weak defense, setting up a Reflect, which halves the damage from physical attacks. So the now neutral Aqua Cutter barely scratches the bark off Sun, and a Giga Drain can OHKO, while also healing Sun back to full HP. And Wug Trio is only a threat when it gets insane RNG with Water Pulse and Headbutt, but Oak gets lucky, so it's another easy one-shot, leaving Kofu with his ace. This big old crab reminds Oak of home, but also reminds him of his goal and what he's fighting for. And even though he hasn't been around for long, Sun must have felt Oak's resolve as he shakes off a Terra boosted Crab Hammer like it was nothing and retaliates with a powerful friendship powered Leaf Storm, blowing away the rip-off Kingler and bringing Oak a step closer to becoming this generation's champion. So far, Oak has met some unique but lovely people here in Paldea, but he's about to come up against the scum of the region as his adventure brings him to the doors of Team Star's Poison Master Atticus. To counter this threat, Green evolves into his final form, the mighty Venusaur, which can surprisingly learn Earthquake, which will be extremely helpful. But after all of his wins, Oak has grown overconfident, and that's really about to cost him. Now his big mistake is against Atticus's league Skunk Tank, as Oak forgets about Sucker Punch, a move that always hits first, but fails if the target doesn't use an attacking move. But since Green is using Earthquake here, Skunk Tank outspeeds and lands a nasty hit, but just under half HP, as Earthquake isn't even close to one-shotting. But that nasty hit reminds Oak to play around Sucker Punch's weakness, as Green opts to use Sleep Powder instead, which does cause Sucker Punch to fail, but does also miss. And then Green proceeds to miss a second one, which is more annoying than it is a problem, but after the third Sleep Powder finally lands, a second Earthquake isn't even enough to KO, as it lives on 1 HP, and then it wakes up on the second turn to land another nasty Sucker Punch, bringing Green well into the yellow before it's able to finish it off with a third EQ. Atticus sends in Muck, and Earthquake barely scratches it as it retaliates with a Sludge Wave, leaving Green on just 9 HP. Oak is forced to swap into Blue, who doesn't appreciate the incoming Sludge Waves, but can win the 1v1 with a couple of Surfs, which then brings in the mini Rever Room, and with Blue too low, it's time for Crystal to come in for an Intimidate drop, as Oak then switches to Silver for a second Intimidate drop and a better type matchup. But sadly on the switch, Silver gets poisoned by a Sludge. To top things off, Flamethrower can't even OHKO, so Silver is forced to tank a second Sludge, leaving Silver in the danger zone. But Oak can finish it off with an extreme speed, sending in the massive Rever Room. The team is looking super rough, so Oak needs to switch into his most reliable teammate, so Crystal re-enters the battle. But honestly, she isn't tanking Nox's Talk nearly as well as Oak might have hoped, and Waterfall is more like a soft sprinkle. So Crystal is also forced out, and Oak has to make a sacrifice if he's ever going to win this fight. So with a heavy heart, he sends in Green, who is barely holding on to life, and Oak watches as Green is flattened by the incoming Nox's Talk, killing one of Oak's precious starters. And this is when Oak begins to think that maybe Green would have had a more fulfilling life had he just given him to a promising Kanto kid. But he can't regret Green's death, he has to celebrate his life, so he sends in Sun, who thanks to Green's sacrifice is able to secure the victory as 2 Psyshocks takes down the Rever Room. Oak and Sun won the battle, but they lost a beloved friend. Goodbye, Green. With a new level cap, Oak's awkward teenagers get to evolve into their final forms, with Blue evolving into the tanky Blastoise and Red into the nuclear Charizard. And now Oak should be more than prepared to take on the working class Larry. Larry has a team of 3 strong physical attackers, so to counter that, Oak leads with Sun, who sets up a Reflect to halve the damage from physical moves, while being made drowsy by a Yawn. Oak's worst nightmare then comes back into play as Kamola hits Sun with a Sucker Punch. But thanks to the Reflect, it barely hurts his little pineapple, and Psyshock is easily enough for a 2-hit KO, and a held Lumpberry wakes Sun up. Sadly, Kamola does outspeed it, so it can reset up a Yawn, but it does fall to a second Psyshock, bringing in Larry's to Dunsparks. Oak decides to make good use of his Reflect turns, as Sun tanks a Hyper Drill and heals back a little with a Giga Drain before falling asleep. This chip should hopefully give Red a fighting chance, as he enters the field into a weak hyper drill. Oak terrors Red to give him a boost to his flamethrower, but it still isn't enough to finish the Dunsparce off, as it paralyzes Red with a glare, slowing Red down tremendously. And with the reflect now gone, Red has to tank a full powered hyper drill, which he barely survives before finally finishing the Dunsparce off with another flamethrower, leaving Larry with his A-star Raptor. But Red is in no fighting condition, so Oak brings in Silver for the Intimidate, dropping Staraptor's attack stat. But even with the attack drop, a Terra boosted Facade does insane damage to Silver, who could have easily died to a crit. So Oak switches again, this time into Crystal, as hopefully it'll be easier to handle at -2 attack. And Oak's Intimidate strats paid out, as it barely scratches Crystal. But Waterfall isn't doing crazy damage either, so Oak opts to set up a Dragon Dance to give Waterfall a boost in power, but Staraptor ends up getting the fabled crit, leaving Crystal on just 1 HP. Oak was extremely lucky to not lose one of his best Pokemon here, as Crystal sets up a Dragon Dance. This not only gives Crystal the power she needs, but also the speed she needs to outrun the oversized turkey, and landing a +1 Waterfall for the KO, and a hard-fought 5th badge. Even after such a tense and stressful battle, poor old man Oak isn't allowed to rest as Nemona jumps him right after the gym fight, and this isn't looking like a free battle by any means, as her lead Lycanroc immediately flinches Sun with a super effective bite, and while it does insane damage, at least Sun can heal back next turn with Giga Drain. This was the theory anyway, but Oak gets a rude awakening to the horrors of bad RNG as it flinches for a second time, leaving Sun effectively useless for the rest of the battle. Well, at least Oak gets to show off his beautiful new blue, who washes away Lycanroc with 2 surfs. This prompts Nemona to send in her little Pulmo, and while Blue could probably 1v1 it, it's not worth any risks, so Oak sends in Silver to finish it off instead with a Flamethrower and Extreme Speed combo. And Silver can one-shot her Goomy with a Play Rough, leaving Nemona with her Ace Meowscarada. But Red is the perfect counter, so with a Terra boosted Flamethrower, Oak can finally get a little rest. And while resting, Oak got sent a package from Kanto containing Pearl, his trusty Tauros, whose normal typing will come in handy against Rhyme, the ghost type gym leader. But we all know how Oak feels about ghost trainer girls, which I imagine are the equivalent to our goth girls, so you know, who can really blame the man? But if he wants to impress the ghost girl of his dreams, then he can't lose here. To ensure victory, Oak instantly terrors Red to boost his fire type moves. Though Bayonet does outspeed as it's yet another Sucker Punch abuser, but a combo of Pearl's Assurance and Red's Heat Wave is able to KO Bayonet and break Mimikyu's disguise, as Rhyme sends out Houndstone to replace her Bayonet, but it's being sent right into danger as the crowd gives Oak an Omni boost, and an Assurance onto Houndstone guarantees that it gets KO'd by Red's Heat Wave, but Mimikyu is still able to hang on with Red HP. And now she's left with her last Pokemon, Toxtricity, but it instantly falls to Pearl's and Red's combo attack, but Mimikyu was able to avoid the Heat Wave, but it was just giving Pearl the chance to claim a KO of her own, as she outspeeds Red and takes the kill with an Insurance. Sorry Rhyme, you're just too young for Oak, and he's not looking to get cancelled. On his travels, Oak does run into something his age, as in the Asado Desert he runs into the Great Tusk Titan. It doesn't find their shared age group as entertaining as Oak, as it starts the battle with a crit knockoff onto Crystal, but even with this crit, Crystal still safely takes down Phase 1 with 2 waterfalls. And well, with the help of Arven and his pants wearing zombie fighter, Phase 2 was even easier than Phase 1. And so Oak sends the old elephant to the retirement home and continues on his adventure. But of course, Nemona has to interrupt poor Oak, demanding another battle. But one Dragon Dance is more than enough to sweep her first 3 Pokemon with Crystal, and then Red comes in to handle her Meowscarada, so now Oak can actually continue his journey. For his 7th badge, Oak has to challenge the Temu version of Sabrina, and well, needless to say, she was nothing compared to the OG Psychic leader, as Crystal sweeps her whole team for a super easy 7th badge, leading Oak to his final gym battle. Realistically, Grusha, the 8th gym leader, should be the easiest, but Oak kind of fumbles. The battle starts off well as Red one-shots Grusha's Frostmoth, but a slight ember in the wind could have done that. The problem is Sir Titan. While being a pure ice type does mean it's weak to fire type moves, Oak forgets to account for its ability, Thick Bat, which heavily nerfs the damage taken from fire type moves, which means it's able to survive a terror boosted flamethrower and retaliate with a nasty liquidation, bringing Red down to 64 HP. Thankfully Red does outspeed, so a second flamethrower is able to finish it off, but replacing it is Grusha's Bear Tick, which could potentially snipe Red with an Aqua Jet. So Oak is forced to bring in Pearl to eat the attack while also lowering Bear Tick's attack stat with Intimidate. A Raging Bull on the next turn is doing decent damage, but it isn't enough for the 2-hit KO, and Bear Tick's Icicle Crash is doing just as much damage. So after trading another blow of attacks, Oak makes the safe play and brings in Blue, who dodges the Icicle Crash on the switch and can finish Bear Tick off with a Surf, leaving Grusha with his ace Altaria, and its first Hurricane ends up missing, so Blue can land a free Surf, but it does barely any damage. And on the next turn, Altaria is able to land a Hurricane, but Blue is pretty tanky, so the battle is looking like a pillow fight. But a pillow fight Blue is determined to win as he dodges a second Hurricane as Surf brings it into kill range. All Blue has to do is dodge a crit and not get confused, and Altaria's Hurricane comes in, sending Blue into the air, but he lands shell up and can retaliate with a final Surf, winning Oak his 8th Paldean badge. While Oak would love to run straight to challenging the champion, there are still a few battles in his way, starting with Team Star Ortega, who leads the battle with his Azumarill as Oak leads with Sun, who unfortunately doesn't outspeed the Aqua Rat as it bounces into the air, avoiding the Giga Drain. Sun really doesn't want to tank the incoming flying attack, so Oak switches him out for Pearl, who is able to at least lower its attack stat with an Intimidate, before being smacked by the bounce and paralyzing him. Now Pearl can't win a 1v1, so instead he sets it up for Sun to win the fight by using a Scary Face to lower Azumarill's speed by 2 stages. Oak then switches Sun back in on a weak Aqua Tail, and then Sun abuses the new speed tiers by setting up a Reflect to halve the damage from incoming physical moves. Though Azumarill just uses Charm, so on the next turn, Sun can one-shot it with a Giga Drain. Thanks to the Reflect, Sun can also 1v1 his Dash Bun. Okay, Oak won't lie to you, it was less of a Reflect and more Sun dodging 2 crunches in a row, as 3 Giga Drains then takes down the Fairy Dog. Next for Ortega is Wigglytuff, who eats up Sun's Giga Drain like it was nothing, and retaliates with a nasty Play Rough. This Wigglytuff could actually stop Sun in his tracks, but he ends up landing a crit on Giga Drain to KO Wigglytuff, leaving Ortega with his Starmobile. Sun is able to tank its magical talks up to 3 times while healing with Giga Drains. This back and forth leaves the Starmobile with under half of its HP. Sun is able to tank a 4th hit, but Giga Drain is out of PP, so he can only fire off a Psyshock, which obviously doesn't heal Sun, so now he's in risk of being killed. So Oak switches Sun out for Red, who gets confused on the switch. Luckily Red is motivated to push through and win the fight, but Flamethrower can't finish it off, leaving it with Red HP. Thankfully the Starmobile can barely touch Red, so one more Flamethrower could take down the stubborn car. After so many battles, Oak wanted to take a rest on the lakeside, but it's interrupted by a massive Dondozo, which attacks Oak, so he's forced to defend himself, as Sun hits a couple of Giga Drains, causing it to flee. But Oak now knows how dangerous it is and can't leave it alone for it to attack someone else, so he follows it across the lake, where it eats a Tatsugiri, giving it a power boost. But Oak isn't alone this time, as Arben joins the fight. But Dondozo was never the real danger, as after phase 2 is taken down, the small Tatsu attacks us, and instantly lands a super effective Icy Wind on Sun. Sun then lands his strongest grass type move, but Leaf Storm is still doing barely any damage, so Oak switches into Pearl as Tatsugiri targets Greedent with a Dragon Pulse, and after recoil from its takedown, Greedent is left with just 9 HP. A Raging Bull from Pearl can bring it pretty low, but it retaliates with a Muddy Water, which actually kills Pearl. Straight up, full HP, with no crit, no rain, no nothing. It's sad to lose Pearl so close to the Elite Four, but Oak must move on and sends in Crystal. But even Crystal can't take attacks from powerful little Tatsu, but she can set up a Dragon Dance for +1 speed and attack. But Crunch still fails to finish it off, and a second Dragon Pulse leaves Crystal on legit 1 HP. And a second Crunch is able to KO. It's alive? Oh my god. Well, thankfully it just uses Taunt, so Crystal can finish it off with a third Crunch, but Oak could have easily lost 2 powerful Pokemon in this fight, and he should be grateful that it was only 1. Before Oak can knock on the door of the Elite Four, he first has to take down the final Team Star member. But Red is honestly able to sweep this pretty hard. All he has to do is set up 1 Swords Dance, giving him a +2 in attack, and from here he can sweep with Acrobatics, making for an easy final Team Star battle. Oak can now finally challenge the Elite Four of Paldea, starting with Rika the Ground type Master. Her lead Wishcash hits Sun with a super effective Blizzard, but Sun, the legend, shakes it off and Oko's with a Giga Drain. But Rika's second Pokemon is going to be a bit more of a problem as she sends in Camerupt. And as ironic as it may sound, Sun doesn't like the heat, so Oak switches him out for Blue. But on the switch, Blue gets hit by a Yawn, so he only has 1 turn before taking a nap. But 1 turn was all he needed, as Aquatail one-shots the Volcanic Camel before falling asleep. Rika then sends in her Donphan. But Blue is pretty tanky, so Oak keeps him on the field, and while Blue has to stay asleep on his first turn, an Earthquake from Donphan is enough to wake him up from his slumber. An Aquatail from Blue does insane damage, but a second Earthquake puts Blue in KO range. So it's pretty risky to use the 90% accurate Aquatail, so Oak keeps it safe, and Blue uses Ice Spinner instead, which is still enough to claim the KO. Blue is too low to deal with Dog Trio, so Oak brings Sun back in, and after tanking a Sucker Punch, a Giga Drain can Oko, and almost heals Sun back to full HP, which is good news because now she sends in her ace Clodsire. But honestly, Sun wools it pretty hard, so a few Giga Drains can win Oak his first Elite Four battle. Now Oak has to take down the second Elite Four member, Poppy the Steel type user. But Red is kind of the perfect counter as he sets up a Swords Dance against Copperajah. Red can then Terra to boost his fire type moves even further, and then proceeds to Flame Charge through her first 3 Pokemon. But her Magnezone is always a bit of a problem as it survives with Sturdy, but it just sets up a light screen, but that really doesn't matter since Red is using physical moves. So after finishing Magnezone off, Poppy sends in her ace Tinkaton, but it gets one-shot by Red, ending the second battle against the Elite Four with a clean sweep. Now Crystal still hasn't shown up in an Elite Four battle yet, but that's about to change as Elite Four Larry uses flying types, and Crystal has the perfect answer. Larry leads with Tropius, who is the perfect candidate to set up a Dragon Dance on as it sets up a sunny day. Oak knows Tropius doesn't have the damage output to threaten Crystal, so she sets up a second D-Dance and a third D-Dance. And from here, it's just another clean sweep. But all the easy members are all taken care of, and now it's time for Hassel the Slayer. The fight starts off perfectly as Crystal dodges the Super Fang, allowing her to set up a free Dragon Dance. Since she dodged the first one, Crystal can then set up a second one, and she isn't punished at all as Noivern misses yet another Super Fang. So Oak might as well set up a third one, and Noivern misses again. What is happening? Well, Oak better not test his luck any further, so Crystal finally takes it down with an Ice Fang. Dragalge is next, but at +3, Crystal can easily take it down, but she does get poisoned by Poison Point. Haxorus and Flapple also easily get one-shot, leaving Hassel with his ace Baxcalibur. Even at +3, Oak is pretty scared that Crystal doesn't have the power needed to one-shot as Baxcalibur is surprisingly bulky, and Oak's fears come true as it lives with red HP. But the Ice Fang blinches. What is this battle, man? Now a Crunch can easily finish it off. That might have been the luckiest Hassel battle of all time. Holy moly. Oak's journey has all led up to this battle. Oak made a lot of friends getting here, but he also lost 2 great ones. But now Oak fights against Geeta to become a champion. Geeta starts the battle with Espathra, and Oak leads with Silver. And Silver surprisingly outspeeds and one-shots with a crunch, thanks to a lucky critical hit. Geeta then sends in her Avalog, which tanks a flamethrower surprisingly well and retaliates with an avalanche, for some reason. It even crits, so if she used Earthquake instead, then Silver would probably be dead. But I guess Oak can't complain, since Silver outspeeds, another flamethrower gets the second KO of the fight. Geeta's third Pokemon is her King Gambit, but again, Silver's damage output just isn't as high as Oak might have hoped, and King Gambit doesn't even get half shot by Flamethrower, and it retaliates with a Stone Edge, killing Silver and wasting the second chance Geeta tried to give him. Oak sends in Red to try and finish the job, but even a Terra boosted Flamethrower can't KO the King of Toilets as another Stone Edge connects, but Red hangs on with 32 HP. While Red is pretty low, he is still able to avenge his fire brother with a Flame Charge, finally taking down the King Gambit, and that was a lot harder than Oak might have anticipated considering he had two fairly strong fire types. Veluza is next for Geeta and threatens Red with an Aqua Jet, so Oak brings in Sun, who shakes off the Aqua Jet and Ice Fang, but Giga Drain isn't able to OHKO. But Sun just dodges the second Ice Fang to freely finish it off with another Giga Drain. Go-Goat is 5th for Geeta, but Sun just slowly takes it down with multiple Psyshocks, leaving Geeta with her ace Glamora. As the team's tank, Blue is sent in to deal with it, and after eating up a Terra Blast with just 41 HP, Blue fires off an Aqua Tail for a straight up one-hit KO. And with that, Oak's dream has come true, and he's ready to head back home to Kanto into the arms of his beloved Agatha. But Oak gets news about this region's professor being trapped in Area 0, so he decides to stay in Paldea just a little bit longer, and his friends challenge him one by one to see if he's actually strong enough to venture down the most dangerous part of Paldea. But Oak sweeps each battle, showing them that he's more than ready to venture down Area 0. Oak fought his way through the depths of Area 0 and finally meets face to face with Professor Sada. Well, actually it's an AI version of Professor Sada and she malfunctions, so to shut her down, we have to beat her in a battle. She uses Paradox Pokemon, a type of Pokemon Oak has no experience with. Because of this, Oak starts the battle with reliable Blue, and for the first time, Blue uses Shell Smash. So after tanking a Leech Life, Blue gets +2 attack and speed. This lets him outspeed and one-shot Slitherwing, which sends in Flutter Mane. But Blue can outspeed and a +2 Aqua Tail easily takes it down. And if Blue outsped Flutter Mane, then Sandy Shocks never stood a chance, so another Aqua Tail claims an OHKO. Sada then finally sends out Blue's biggest counter, her Brute Bonnet, which resists Blue's stab Aqua Tail, but survives a +2 Ice Spinner with yellow HP, allowing it to retaliate with a payback. But even with his lower defenses, Blue survives on red HP. Brute Bonnet does have Sucker Punch, so Oak switches Blue for red, but it went for Earth Power, which red is thankfully immune to, so it's a free switch. Brute Bonnet is able to Sucker Punch red for almost half of his HP before being carried by a Flame Charge, bringing in Sada's Scream Tail. Oak decides to terrestrialize Red while setting up a Swords Dance. Red then shakes off a Zen Headbutt, and on the next turn he hits a +2 Terra boosted Flame Charge, which doesn't do a lot of damage. But Oak was using it so Red got another speed boost, as Zen Headbutt leaves Red in, well, the red. And Acrobatics does finally take the Scream Tail down, leaving Sada with her ace Roaring Moon. Thanks to the speed boost from the Flame Charges, Red is able to outspeed and land a +2 Acrobatics, but Roaring Moon survives with red HP and retaliates with a Stone Edge, killing Red. He was with Oak from the very beginning, but he's glad he made it to the end. Oak then sends in Crystal, who has to dodge a crit from Stone Edge and land an Ice Fang. But this is Crystal we're talking about here, so she obviously clutches up and wins the battle with a final Ice Fang, ending Oak's adventure here in Paldea. If you enjoyed this video, maybe you'll like the ones on screen, like this one where Oak's grandson Gary Oak takes on the same challenge. And for a more sparkly video, maybe try this one where I did a shiny only amphibian Nuzlocke.